Welcome everyone to the Dance is Medicine podcast. My name is Sophia Celine. I'm a neuroscientist and dance healer, and I've created this podcast to have dancers to share their stories about how they use dance to cope with health problems and how has dance helped them go through hard situations in their lives. I think the science is important, but I think science cannot replace stories, and that's why this podcast is available, and that's why I started this project. I'm very excited to introduce you to Sam. He has been dealing with grief and a lot of issues regarding his daughters. He's been through very stressful times that have led to anxiety and depression, and he has used dance as a way to cope with it. Now, he has a very interesting background. He has a Buddhist background, and is also a trained nurse that has worked with trauma and intensive care, and also trained as a health visitor and worked for several specialist health worked for several years as a specialist health visitor for families with complex needs. In the last few years, he has been working as an advanced neurodevelopmental nurse, and is a specialist for children, and also developed a business called The Conscious World. If you don't follow it, I do, so please go and follow. And it still runs workshops, retreats, events, and it has this visioning of conscious dance and tantra and conscious relating. So because I relate a lot to dance medicine, I'm really excited to see what it has to say about his background and how he has used all this amazing background to really overcome difficult situations that he had to encounter. So Sam, please introduce yourself as you want. Tell us a bit more about your background. You have such an interesting life experience, so I'm really excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Sophia. Yeah, so I've always had a special relationship with dance, but it really came to the fore in the last 4 years. So as you said, I was brought up as a Buddhist in the Theravadan tradition, the Forest Sangha, it was in the UK, but my family were very involved always since I was a baby with traditional Buddhism. It's a very aesthetic tradition, and I spent a lot of time, particularly when I was younger, at the monasteries around monks and nuns in that tradition. And also once I became a kind of teenager and in my early 20s, I spent a lot of time living in the monasteries in the UK, in California, in Switzerland. So I had this relationship for many years with Buddhism and meditation. I think I probably had I've been meditating since I was a teenager, but I probably had about 20 years where I was meditating every day, often a couple of hours a day. And it was a very core part of my identity. And dance was something that I enjoyed, but it wasn't, I don't think, as much a spiritual practice when I was younger. It was definitely cathartic, but I noticed this sea change in a difficult time about 4 years ago. I was going through a difficult separation from the mother of my daughter. We were in lots of conflict, and it had gone on for a while, and it was exhausting and quite unpleasant. As disputes like that can get, there was a lot of anger. I felt a lot of grief over the separation. And in the middle of it, my mum, who I had a wonderful mum. I was very lucky. She was very wise. She's always been there. My parents were together for 42 years. But my mum, 3 years and 5 months ago, she was driving home, or a lady was driving her home from yoga together, and the lady had some kind of medical episode, which meant that she'd had fits in the past. So they reckon that she had most likely some kind of fit, but the people in the car behind on the 30-mile-an-hour zone say the car just suddenly accelerated, and within a couple of 100 meters it was going about 55 miles an hour, and it hit a wall, and they both died instantaneously. And this was an enormous shock for everyone in my family, and in fact everyone who knew my mum, because she was very well loved. So I got to see her at the crash site, and it was a devastating thing just to suddenly have her taken away. And I was aware at the time that it was going to be a major process of transformation for my family, who had this very kind of strong and established identity. My parents had always been a unity, and we had a very clear sense of who we were, and my brother and sister as well. We all enjoyed my mum's wisdom, and she was very giving and supportive and loving. So it was this very enormous loss, and my father had been with her since before we were born. So for him, it was an enormous loss. And where one in difficult times might go to your family to draw on, each other's support, suddenly everyone was struggling. My dad, was devastated, and I think it was the biggest loss for him, as he lived so interconnected with her. They were like trees who had grown together. And it was a very traumatic thing, and for it took an enormous amount of time before I really understood quite how it affected different areas of my life. So it didn't stop either, the conflict I was in with my then baby mother. But I started dancing more quite quickly after that. And I was dancing. I'd been in for a long time practicing in the meditation, but I was finding that it wasn't that it wasn't helpful, but it wasn't at the time it definitely wasn't relieving me. And actually I had a lot of anxiety coming up. I had the classic hallmarks of grief and bereavement, and also I think in hindsight a lot of depression. And I cried a lot, which for me was quite unusual. I think I then had quite a high threshold for crying, and crying I felt was healthy, but then I stopped crying, but I was still had this kind of recurring sense of low mood. And I struggled with my work at the time. Was finding the work, which is always busy and full on. I found it particularly overwhelming, and actually had to take 6 months off in the end. So I started to get more and more involved with dancing in a number of different traditions. The 5 Rhythms, which is Gabrielle Roth's take on ecstatic dance, different forms of ecstatic dance, and movement medicine, which is another conscious dance tradition. And I took an approach at the time where it was about I was enjoying dancing, and my life I'd been working very, very hard for several years at that point. I had a very complicated life, and I became aware of this lack of balance, and I became aware that the freedom that I got from dancing was extremely powerful for me, and gave me a lot of joy. Even in the midst of some pretty dark places, I was able to move that weather. And when you meditate, you become aware of how your mind constructs this almost artificial process where when you're depressed, you think, I am depressed, and identify with it. And then when you meditate, you realize that it's not you who's depressed, it's just feelings of being sad arising, changing, and ceasing. But actually what dance was giving me was a combination of held awareness, or awareness of process, and being with the process of what was going on within my body. And it was a process of embodiment. So when my mind was kind of getting stuck on stuff and going over and over again difficult things that were arising and were remembered, the being and moving into my body was a very powerful medicine for working with that and stopping that process. And the body loves to move, so the natural joy that was arising in the process of dancing with grief, dancing with whatever was arising, even dancing with tears pouring down your face, was extremely healing. And I think it brought a lot of joy into my life in a way that created balance and was inherently quite healing. And there was a playfulness that had become, I think, lost in my, very, very hardworking several years I'd had before that. And it allowed a playfulness and joy, and interconnection that was very healing as well. So it wasn't just about what was going on in my embodiment and while I was dancing, it was the interconnected nature of dancing in a group of people in a held space. And this is a conscious dance. You create a space, there's kind of some rules, but within that there's a complete freedom of expression. So you might see someone rolling, grunting on the floor, or pretending to be, or acting out as an animal, or all manner of eccentric movements that one would, if one saw someone walking down the street, be slightly nervous if you saw someone expressing. And it's completely possible to express that on the dance, but particularly on a conscious setting, without rule or censure or judgment. And that non-judgmental space, I think, is very powerful. And it was very powerful for me as a form of freedom. And it allowed me to create a space of freedom from the things that were ailing me. So when you meditate, you might talk about non-judgmental awareness, and just letting things be. But actually within a conscious dance frame of reference in a held space, there's a non-judgmental space. So you can bring your non-judgmental awareness, and it's held by other non-judgmental awareness surrounding you, and it's a non-judgmental space which offers a great deal of freedom, especially if you're working in difficult stuff, or have got ongoing very, very difficult interactions that you've got to deal with in your life. And it's inherently very healing. And the affirmations during the process. So, I danced in all sorts of different workshops, some where it was much more of an internal process, others there was more group work, interaction. I became very interested in interrelational movement and the process by which we move with other people and how we connect with other people in an open way, an open-hearted way. Became interested in aspects of Tantra. With my then partner, I became interested in practices like eye gazing, which is a relational meditation, which works and fits very well in a number of different contexts within dance. And I found all of these things were the medicine that I needed, and the low mood and anxiety, I think, are both inherently relieved by interrelationship, and by following the joy that is possible to access through movement, and the creativity that I was able to express on the dance floor practically stimulated creativity elsewhere in my life. And I've had a very fertile period coming out of this period of being quite low. I produced a great deal of creative work. I designed this visioning process that I found very rewarding with structured vision boarding called the Golden Mandala. I made all manner of different events and many new friends, and it's transformed my relationship to socializing dance in a way that deeply affected my mental health. So I think it's almost hard to describe to someone who's not a dancer quite how valuable it was, but I think much of it is to do with the way that dance connects up the body and mind and allows that critical judgmental mind for me to take a back seat. And when I'm too busy in the moment with moving my body, with responding to both the music, with responding to the people around me, with responding to the floor, tasting the earth with my feet, I should say I'm mostly dancing barefoot, then it allows freedom from that overthinking, over criticism, and allows a process of coming into the present moment, which is very familiar as, you know, the great value within meditation is that you can come into the present moment and be with what is. And this natural process where endorphins arise when you dance, you feel good, is a very basic human activity. And I'm doing some work in the summer. I'm probably going to be running a retreat looking at primal processes, which as I have developed to understand them, would be core human activities such as dance, singing together, eating together, dreaming together. And they're core human activities that we've all shared back through time immemorial, and they tap into basic human abilities and archetypal forces of living as part of the human race, living in small tribes and part of larger tribes, and linking into that. So I think it's a primal process dance that allows us to access healing from deep places, often even below the level of our attention or awareness. So it's probably from the, you know, from accessing, you know, deep human traditions where we've been dancing together around fires for as long as there's been humankind. And I feel that some of the benefits that I've enjoyed have actually been, you know, that it's almost below the level of my attention, and it's basic connection to humanity and to this sense of continuation. The dance will go on, you know, even when I can dance no more, they'll still be dancing and they'll still be connected, you know. And in some ways the dance is continuous, if that makes any sense at all. So anxiety was also something that was a significant theme for me, and I found that I suffered a lot from anxiety, and I equally found that dance was a significant medicine for that, and stilling the what if mind, and focusing instead on what was, and stilling this balance between being and becoming. So it was much more being. I wasn't trying to get away from the past, although sometimes I dance hard and might feel that. But once you really get into the dance, you're just being, and that's enormously healing, from a perspective of emotional health or mental health. So I've would say that my relationship to dance now is a very spiritual one, and I'd still call myself a Buddhist, and a Buddhist who dances. And I I don't I don't know if there's a particular tradition that you could ascribe that to, but I definitely find that the Dharma or Buddhist teachings for me is very interrelated to my spiritual experience of dance. And the teachings for me seem very interrelated to my spiritual experience of dance. So yeah, I think that's what I want to say about that. And if anyone wants to speak to me, I don't mind answering questions. You can look me up online. You've got my name. It's a small world, isn't it? But I feel very grateful to having found conscious dance and ecstatic dance and this dance medicine in all its forms. I feel very grateful to it. So Sophia,
Thank you so much for that, Sam. That
pass
was...
back to you.
Hello?
I'm gonna pass back to you.
Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you so much for that. Was amazing. And I actually took some notes because I was like, yeah, I want to mention this and I want to mention that. Yeah, you mentioned a couple of things, such as like the properties of dance and how like dance is like some form of meditation, but it's more like a moving meditation, and it brings much more than just meditating. And that's very interesting because that's the thing that I really interested in dance as well, is what are the properties that make it so healing, and then if we put each property separately, like mindfulness, embodiment, proprioceptive awareness, synchronization with others, a lot of those components, we can see that them in separate, they create a good impact on the brain. And then what dance does is it brings it all together in one. And that's what my dance integrated healing method is based on, those properties and other related things that can enhance those properties. And that's really interesting that you said as well, how that also changed you in other domains in your life. So like those properties, they don't just stay in dance, they really cause changes in your brain that make you feel the world differently. They make you think differently. There's many studies that have proved how you move changes how you think and influences how you think. If we want to go further, there's many studies that have shown, structured dance will cause you to think a certain way and will cause you to have better cognition for logical tasks, for instance, whilst improvisational dance will make you have better results at creative thinking and creative tasks. And that's really interesting because how you move really changes how you think and how you see the world. And then when you use improvisational styles, then you get to know new ways of moving and new ways of thinking and new ways of feeling, and it's kind of like transforming yourself somehow. And as you said, this has come from very early in humanity. So dance being a medicine nowadays is like a new concept, but it's not really a new concept. Before dance became structured and something to be on stage, it was first of all used as a ritual or as a medicine. So it comes from really long, from a long time ago in humanity. And when we practice dance as medicine, we keep bringing those roots, and it's like a continuity of that healing, and is honoring dance for what it is at its core. And I also love that you mentioned something about you getting to this sense that you don't judge yourself anymore. There's this less critical, and that really has to do with the flow state. So Something really happens in the brain when we enter a flow state. The default mode network is activated, and this is the network that is activated when we are really processing internal things, when we're really focused and immersed in the task, and we kind of lose sense of time, space, and we enter this flow state. And what that does is any other networks that are involved in any other brain structures and networks that are involved in self-criticism and self, how would you say, self-judgment, they are less activated during the default mode network and during the flow state. And that's what brings that feeling. And that's where dance also plays a role in kind of like this is the impact that dance has on the brain. It really changes the brain structures. It really switches on and off various networks, and this is where the healing really starts coming from. Not to mention about neurogenesis, so new neurons being born, not to mention about plasticity, so new networks being changed. That's all new level, and that's why dance is so beneficial for like neurological disorders. But this is where it really comes, all comes together. So is this thing where, okay, the science says this, but then every story that I hear in this podcast, I keep on hearing the same things, the same pattern of things, and the same people keep saying the same, more or less the same things about dance, how dance has helped them cope with emotions and feelings, and how it has helped them see the world differently. So it really comes down to also each individual story. Just thinking what else I have here, because I took a couple of notes. Yeah, I think that was it that I wanted to mention, how it's like very interesting, and you have also a good connection to practices. You mentioned 5 rhythms and ecstatic dance. I'm very familiar with those practices as well, and they become quite different from structured dances. So I know that often people, until now actually, everyone that has been on the podcast has done like structured dance styles. I think you're the first person who's been into other kinds of dance that are not structured, and I think it's really interesting. It seems that both really cause and effect, but it seems like I'm more a fan of improvisational. I've always been an improviser, even with structured dance styles, and I think there's this extra benefit of improvisation because it really allows you, it really instigates creativity in your brain, and you become more open to possibilities. And oftentimes, even like when you need to make a decision or solve a problem, just moving without being dance helps you have more creativity in solving that problem, and especially when you really explore. And is that non-judgmental environment is really important too. And I love that you mentioned about gazing with your partner and all of that. I don't know if gazing is a word, so sorry if it's not. But sharing, having that, being known, being acknowledged by someone else as well, it's really important, because one of the things that really improves this healing in dance is synchronization. Synchronization has been proven to reduce pain, to make us feel calm. It has all kinds of impact in our emotional brain. So it's and it even has impact in trauma. And this is the techniques that I use in like dance therapy. A lot of synchronization and mirroring is done in dance therapy. Is the way that the therapist communicates with the patient and vice versa. And it really works. And also what I wanted to mention, because I have here in the notes, it's an aspect of, some things you cannot process through the pathways of thoughts and words and thinking. Some things you have to process through the body. And I think it was, I'm not sure who said this, I think it was Freud who said the most amazing things happen without our consciousness. So sometimes we can't go there cognitively and consciously. Sometimes it has to be expressed to the body, because a lot of the things that we experience also have this signature of non-words. That is not something that we can cognitively think or picture. And the body as an organism needs to process it, because our bodies, we are an organism. So we have an organism. The organism has its own language that we don't understand. The organism is always talking to the brain and saying what's going on with the body, but we're not conscious of everything, and we can't control everything either. So our reflexes, for instance, so it's like the organism has to also express, but that cannot be said through words or cognitively thinking and seeking a solution. And this is why talk therapies don't always work, because some things you cannot solve through thinking. And I think it's really important for people to understand that, because more and more is being popular using dance for treating traumas and mental illnesses and even physical health problems. And I think it's important we start understanding the impact of movement. So even just sitting in some therapist office or psychologist office, just the body language of the person is important. The body language that you have towards the patient is important. And I've worked in mental health, and for me, the body language was what was more important. The words were just there, but it was seeing underneath that. And I think it's very underestimated. We're so used to words, concepts, cognition, that we forgot that the body knows a lot. So with this said, I always ask Sam, if what would you like to say to people who may be going through what you went through? What would you like to tell them? And also, if you have anything, and also if what would you say to people who are listening to us right now, and they're not dancers? What would you say to them to convince them to embrace that art form?
I would thank you, Sophia. I would say, what are you afraid of? Because many people will say, oh, I'm not a dancer, or I don't have the body of a dancer, or I don't have they're worried about what people will observe or judge in them. And really, it's fascinating when you think about it. What judgment would anyone make about you dancing? A dancing body is a body that moves. We all dance, whether we're on two legs, whether we're in a wheelchair. We're all able to dance and move if we can move our body. I think ultimately you could probably dance even if you were completely paralyzed, and it would be an internal process. You could dance your awareness. I would say to anyone who, I would recommend that they try this if there's, if they're wanting to explore some of the creative, juicy, delicious energy that's held within themselves, then dance is a wonderful modality at any age, whether you're 6 months, 60, 99, at any age. It's an amazing thing to move your body and to feel the kind of creative possibilities implicit in the human form. And it's a very heart-opening thing to come together and dance with others. And in this time of lockdown, I've kept dancing. I've danced under the stars. I've danced in my lounge, and even dancing on the internet. There's an amazing sense of connection dancing with other people, and it's definitely allows you to access a form of freedom and access deep reserves of creative energy that otherwise, may be difficult in our complicated lives, where we're often having to be in particular forms, present ourselves in certain ways to comply with the social norms around us. And dance is a wonderful way to tap into the more basic parts of yourself, and bring joy into your life. So I couldn't recommend it more. And mixing it up with yoga, with meditation, with other forms of embodiment as a way to access healing and joy, and be free from the things that causes human suffering. So we only have each moment to play with. We shouldn't waste them. The days, as the Buddha said, are relentlessly passing. How well are you spending your time? You want to be as alive and to live as fully in the moment as is possible. And this is the path to happiness. And when I get lost, in my head, this is the medicine that works very well at the moment. Dance. It allows me to come back into my body and be grounded, grounded in something that's more real. Our wonderful, complicated heads, brains, and all of the complexity that makes up humans, there's an underlying simplicity that you can access through movement and attention and embodied awareness. And I think it's extremely powerful and valuable, and I couldn't recommend it more highly, really. I think that's.
Thank you so much. That was.
I'll pass over to you, Sophia.
Thank you so much. That was great, and I agree with everything. Sometimes it's being weird, this podcast, in a good way, because I feel like, oh my god, I feel like it's my brain talking as well, because I think we think very alike. And especially when you say how we are always meant to be in certain positions and move a certain way, because it's societal rules, and how we get into these motor patterns, and then dance comes in and disrupts all of that, and just we get to play with our motor abilities, and we get to play with the possibilities of moving within our bodies, and if that's not enough reason, then I don't know. And that's where the healing comes from as well, because then you're creating new neural pathways, you really developing motor areas in your brain, emotional areas, and it's just I don't think there's nothing like it. But as a dance neuroscientist, I could be a bit biased, but really support dance is an amazing thing for the brain. And yes, is that question, what are you afraid of? At the end of the day, you get one body, you get this moment, and what you're going to do with your living body in this moment. Are you going to enjoy it, or just worry about what other people may think? And I guess in environments, dance practices that really create those non-judgmental environments really help people who are not used to dance, or they're scared to really open up. That has helped me when I started doing like improvisational dance styles and even contemporary. I just started seeing another layer of myself. And today I dance as I want. I don't care what other people think. I don't care if other people think I'm a good dancer. That's not why I dance. And I think that really helps open that up. Do you have anything else to say, Sam?
I just wanted to say about playfulness and yeah, to be playful as a child is intimately linked with growth and learning, and it has an effect even on an adult of any age of rejuvenation. So the playfulness that can come with dance, I think, inherently makes your brain younger. And it's, you know, people will talk sometimes about older people loving their dance and how young they seem, but it's a real thing. I think to be playful is inherently helps you rejuvenate, yeah, and access to a sense of joy, which is yeah, of great value. So thank you, Sophia. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. And this conversation has been really, it's been giving me lots of things to think about. So it's been
Also,
absolutely.
the same here. Actually, is I feel like we think so alike, and it's so interesting. Because I haven't encountered someone who thinks the same way. It's just it's been weird in a good way. And yes, what you mentioned about the playfulness, I don't remember who said this because I have so many authors and names in my head, but someone's supported that the when toddlers start exploring the world and they start figuring, there's all these things that go in your brain as you start walking and crawling, that your brain is trying to figure spatial navigation, the size of your body, and how can your limbs move. And they say this author consider that is already a dance. So we start dance there, where your body is really trying to understand the motor system and how can your body move, and what kinds of things can your body do, and this great spatial awareness starts developing as well. So it was interesting that you mentioned that. Um, so this is the end of the podcast. For everyone listening, thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your time. I
Thank you
also
for
want
listening.
to thank you so much. I also want to announce that on the World Dance Day, I am giving a free class on my dance integrated healing methods, and I also have a dance wellness program prepared for the 1st of May. So it goes from the 1st of May to the 15th of May, and it's every Saturday. There's a different workshop you can attend. So if dance healing is something that really interests you, and if you want to know more from the neuroscientific point of view, I have a lot to say. And in the workshops, I go more into detail. Um, and I give you brain pictures because everyone likes brain pictures. But if you are really interested in it, if you are not a dancer, these kind of dance styles are a great way to start. So instead of going to structured dance, maybe we start with some improvisational healing and movement medicine practice that helps you get out of that mindset of self-judgment. So with this, I'll see you in the next podcast, and thank you everyone for being here.